Guess what? I'm on a road trip. Headed to Coffs Harbour in New South Wales. It's about 450 kilometres, about 280 miles, somewhere in that range. And it'll take about 4.5 to 5 hours, depending on how many times I stop. I am thinking of stopping because as I head down, I will do the walk in the garden at some time. If I don't do it on the trip down, I'll find a nice park in Coffs Harbour and do it there. But at some point in this trip, I'm going to do the walk in the garden. I've got some cold stuff with me, drinks and things, and then dinner for tonight, so I can save some money. And I've got my coffee plunger for coffee in the morning. Got some snacks and lunch in this bag here, and got all the other things that I need as well for tomorrow. So I'm all ready to go, and I'm looking forward to it. I quite enjoy a long drive, so come with me. I'll try and take some footage along the way, so you can see a little bit of the trip. There's some beautiful spots, but it'll just depend on access and whether or not I can pull over and all those sorts of things. So anyway, let's see how this all turns out. Well, I made it to Coffs Harbour yesterday evening, and it was a little bit too late to do any videoing, and I didn't get the chance to video on the way down. So I'm going to try and catch some this morning before I head back to Brisbane this afternoon. So right now I'm in the car park of the Big Banana, and let's go and have a look at that, shall we? No visit to Coffs Harbour is complete without stopping at the Big Banana. We used to come here a lot when we were kids, at least once a year anyway. It's a Coffs Harbour area. We always stopped at the Big Banana. Their specialty is a chocolate covered banana. Don't know if they still do that, I'm sure they do. Coffs Harbour is a huge banana growing area. Apparently that is now being rivaled by blueberries. But bananas for many years was Coffs Harbour's claim to fame. So Coffs Harbour is situated on the Pacific Ocean as a harbour, obviously, and you can see in the background down there is the Big Banana. Coffs Harbour was first identified in the 1840s by a gentleman by the name of John Coffs, and he called it Coffs Harbour. So about 20 years later, a surveyor, official surveyor, was coming through, marking out the land, and he called it Coffs Harbour. He misunderstood the oral presentation of the name and recorded it as Coffs Harbour. So poor John Coffs, who had named the space after himself, was stricken from the record, and it became Coffs Harbour. It is a beautiful spot. It's a little closer to Brisbane than it is to Sydney, but it's roughly halfway between the two. And as I said, bananas is a big major crop. Back in the late 19th century, early 20th century, timber was the big product from this area, and they needed the harbour to extricate the timber. There was no overland routes to the major cities, so the harbour presented itself as an ideal space to take the timber from. So let's think a little bit more about this shame. In fact, I'm going to try and find a quieter space. I just wanted you to be able to get an idea of the proximity of Coffs Harbour to the ocean, and I will go and find a quiet spot now to do the rest of the video. So I've just come a little way down the street to a park that's at the beach, and this is really nice. Unfortunately, it's a bit of a cloudy day today, but I don't think that's impacting this too much. So there's this lovely little seat here, and I am going to try and explore this question of what is shame. In order to try and take the journey that I want to take through responding to the issue of shame, it's really good for us to get a handle on what we are talking about when we're talking about shame. I have now been looking at and even researching in the area of shame for more than 20 years now, as a result of my own journey and own discovery of this reality. And in that time, it's been hard to nail down a really good way of defining shame. Ultimately, when we're talking about shame, the idea of worthlessness is attached to it clearly. There is this brokenness that goes with shame, and all of those are important principles. But I've read a lot of books that can help clarify. But there's a passage that I read in a book a number of years ago that really helped me kind of narrow it down a little bit. I'm going to actually read that passage for you. This is a book written by Robin Stockett, and it's called "Restoring the Shame Towards a Theology of Shame," and it's been very helpful for me. I've got my glasses on. Of course, that is the elephant in the room, isn't it? Because when I'm walking and I don't have my glasses on, I have these big grooves in the side of my head, and clearly that's indicative of the fact that I use glasses a lot, and I've probably grown a little in weight since I first got my glasses. But glasses don't reflect well; they can reflect badly when you're videoing. So I decided to do the walking without glasses, so as to not have to do that. But when I'm reading, clearly I'm going to need them. Shame is far more difficult to define, but afflicts us all in a pervasive way. It is the nagging feeling that maybe we are not quite good enough, that we are insignificant, that we have not made our mark on the world. In more severe cases, it expresses itself in the driving need to perform, to compete against others for the right to exist, or it is manifest in the desire to hide, to withdraw, to retreat into some safer world where no one can hurt or destroy. This malaise sometimes erupts in violence done to others for no apparent reason, or it smoulders beneath the surface, eating away at our self-esteem and even our bodies. For some, it is camouflaged by an excess of pious spirituality. For others, by a weary resignation. We go to extraordinary lengths to run away from this disease of the soul, by denying it is there, by refusing to stop, by filling every corner of our life with busyness, hoping that the dread feeling will simply drift away and disappear. What is the name of this experience? It is called shame. Shame is without a doubt a socially constructed phenomena with profoundly personal, spiritual, and political repercussions. I dare say we've been seeing some of those things in recent days. So that gives a good picture of shame, and most of us, if not all of us, at different times can identify that feeling that either pushes us into hiding, or pushes us to be aggressive, or pushes us to perform harder. It is accompanied, or it is this sense that I don't belong, that I'm not good enough, that I have to work harder than others, that
my appearance is not good enough, my job is not good enough, my existence is not good enough. All of those are captured in this idea of shame. And when we start to see how pervasive that is, we recognize it is a real problem. As I said last week, um, most of us find a way of coping with that. But our coping tends to be defense mechanisms. And it is how we move forward and and deal with this issue of shame that will ultimately reflect whether or not this journey in the garden is is a good one for us. In a video early in the piece, I unpacked three places that we experience shame, or three types of shame, and let me just wrap up by quickly re-identifying those things. Shame is first and foremost an emotion, like any other emotion. When a person says "I feel ashamed," that's the emotion that they are feeling. They are feeling the emotion of shame, and we call it ashamed. It's why when you start talking about shame, a lot of people, like I said last week, will say, "I don't struggle with shame." That's because they've journeyed through life and they've dealt with their struggles, and they don't feel like they have anything to be ashamed of. And I would say that most times those people are probably right. But it is the next two areas that shame works that is where our real struggle is, and the one that is most addressed in academic literature and by psychologists and psychiatrists is psychological shame. It is the thinking patterns that are developed in the context of that emotional experience. In fact, it's probably true to say that there is a mutually informing process, that shame as a psychological phenomenon shapes our emotion, and our emotion feeds back to our psychological state. It is in that psychology of shame that we see the most impact, the most dysfunctional impact, where people act out in ways that is clearly antisocial. Shame is a social phenomena. It isn't couched in the experience of society apart from the experience of individuality. So there definitely is shame and honor cultures where shame is the medium by which people identify how well they are fitting into that community. But shame isn't what society says to me about me. Shame is what I believe society is saying to me about me. Now, sometimes that belief can be very clear because it's right in our face, as in a shame culture, or as in quite often there are remedial responses that heavily use shame to try and as a way of mitigating people behavior, and people will say you're shameless, you need to recognize how bad the things you are doing. So it is that psychological phenomena that can quite often cause people to have significant struggles in life, and the way that you identify that is the extent to which people are able to relate adequately to the societies in which they belong. Anytime somebody is asserting themselves too aggressively or too overpoweringly, or withdrawing too consistently, they're dealing with the impact of shame. But I propose that there is a third area in which we struggle with shame, and I've called it ontological shame. It's the shame of being, and that is that as we journey through life, it is definitely connected with the psychological piece, but it seems to me independent of it, that just being has this sense of shame with it, this sense of brokenness, this sense of worthlessness, and it is that to which I think there is a really effective response, as there is for all shame, but it is this ontological shame that is the most persistent, that this response is the most persistently effective. Well, thanks for taking time to look at this video, and we shall do it again next week as we continue to walk in the garden.
So just a brief postlude. When I do these videos, I almost always try and find a space that doesn't have other people around, so that I don't have to interact with people while doing the videos. And it's not always easy to do that in a public space. this space where I am is right next to the beach, and there are a few people around, but not many. But while I'm videoing it, two different times people walked past within about 10 feet to 3 meters of me, and I find that enormously difficult because immediately I start imagining what they are thinking. Are they thinking that I'm some kind of a narcissistic person trying to video myself and just overwhelmed by my own self-importance, or are they thinking that this is an odd thing for a person to be doing? Just really struggling to know what they're thinking, and it makes it difficult to do the video in that context. I'm never going to see those people again, and I have no idea what they thought. It doesn't impact me at all, except that in the doing of this video, I'm struggling with my own thoughts about what they were thinking. That's shame. That's what it looks like. And I process that by saying to myself, it's irrelevant, and what I'm actually doing in these videos is important, and I'm able to deal with it. But that doesn't stop me from feeling bad. And typically, that's true when we are dealing with shame. We can have mechanisms by which we respond to shame, but it is not unusual for us to continue to struggle with that feeling even after we've mentally processed it. That's how deep it goes into our being.